Hey everyone, tonight we're pulling back the velvet curtain on a chapter of history that rarely gets mentioned in polite conversation. We're stepping deep into the sun-scorched sands of ancient Egypt and slipping straight into the hidden, perfumed chambers of the pharaohs to uncover the strangest sexual practices of these god kings. Picture the soft whispers, the flickering glow of oil lamps, the heavy fragrance of lotus and myrrh filling the air, all creating the perfect setting for unions that were both sacred and completely bizarre. What you're about to hear might make even your boldest dating app stories look like a quiet evening at the library. Honestly, you probably won't make it through this dive into the deepest, darkest secrets of the Nile's rulers without a few raised eyebrows, if not a full-on jaw drop. So, before we get too comfortable, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, why not drop your location and local time in the comments? It's always fun to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing right at the edge of ancient Egyptian royalty, a world where the lines between the divine and the deeply physical weren't just blurred, they were often completely erased. In this land of pyramids and papyrus scrolls, the pharaoh wasn't simply a king. He was a living god, a direct descendant of Ra, Horus, and the entire celestial lineup. This divine status wasn't just for show. It seeped into every single aspect of his existence, especially his private life. You see, the pharaoh's bedroom was not merely a place for rest or procreation. It was a sacred space, a microcosm of the cosmos, where his actions, even the most intimate ones, carried profound implications for the entire kingdom. His fertility was directly tied to the fertility of the Nile, the prosperity of the harvests, and the very stability of Egypt itself. Talk about performance anxiety, right? Imagine the pressure of knowing your personal prowess literally dictated the nation's wheat supply. Scholars still debate whether some of the more outlandish practices were literal acts or purely symbolic rituals. But what's undeniable is the deep connection between royal sexuality and cosmic order. It's widely acknowledged that the pharaoh's divine right to rule was often reinforced through complex genealogies and, surprisingly, through practices that we might find a bit unconventional today. The royal family was believed to be separate and superior, their bloodline pure and sacred. This belief system led to some truly eyebrow-raising customs, which we'll dive into deeper in the next section. But for now, just picture the ancient Egyptian court bustling with servants, priests, and officials, all fully aware that at the heart of their world stood the pharaoh, whose very essence, including his sexuality, was intertwined with the fate of their civilization. It wasn't just about heirs. It was about ensuring the sun rose, the Nile flooded, and the cosmos hummed along nicely. A fascinating tidbit. Some pharaohs were even depicted with an erect penis in certain artistic contexts, not as a sign of vulgarity, but as a symbol of their life-giving, regenerative power, a visual affirmation of their ability to bring prosperity to the land. It's a far cry from modern political campaigns, isn't it? No wonder they built such massive tombs. They probably needed a good long rest after all that divine pressure. Having stepped into the initial chambers of the pharaoh's private world, you now confront the rather startling reality of divine incest and royal bloodlines. This wasn't merely a scandalous rumor whispered behind closed doors. It was a deeply ingrained sacred practice fundamental to the ancient Egyptian concept of kingship. You see, the pharaoh was believed to be a living god, a manifestation of Horus on earth, and maintaining the absolute purity of this divine essence was paramount. The most direct, most sacred way to achieve this, in their understanding, was through marriage within the immediate royal family. We're talking about unions between siblings, sometimes half-siblings, and in certain debated instances, even father-daughter pairings, all designed to safeguard what they considered an untainted lineage. It sounds utterly bizarre to our modern ears, like something ripped from a particularly intense family drama, but for them, it was a solemn, inescapable duty. The underlying rationale, as alien as it might seem, was remarkably consistent within their cosmology. Divine blood, they believed, simply could not be diluted. If the pharaoh embodied a god, then the woman who would bear his heir, the next god-king, had to share that same unblemished divinity. And who better to ensure this sacred purity than a sister or a daughter? Individuals sharing the most direct genetic link. This practice wasn't just a political maneuver. It mirrored the mythical unions of their most revered deities, like Osiris and Isis, who were both brother and sister and yet conceived Horus, the very archetype of Egyptian kingship. So when you envision a royal wedding in ancient Egypt, banish any thoughts of typical societal norms. Instead, picture a union meticulously orchestrated to uphold cosmic balance, secure the succession, and maintain an unbroken chain of divine power. It was less about personal romantic connection, although affection certainly blossomed in many royal marriages, and profoundly more about the perpetuation of divine authority. Numerous historical records confirm the widespread nature of brother-sister marriages among pharaohs across various dynasties. For instance, Ramses II, one of Egypt's most famous rulers, married his sister Nefertari, who rose to become one of the most celebrated and influential queens in Egyptian history. Similarly, Akhenaten, the revolutionary pharaoh, married Nefertiti. And while their exact familial relationship is still a subject of scholarly debate, some suggest a cousin, others a full sister. The pattern of close kin marriage remains evident. These were not isolated incidents. They represented a consistent royal policy for maintaining the perceived purity and legitimacy of the ruling line. It was an incredibly exclusive dating pool where your options were quite literally your immediate family. Imagine trying to explain that concept at a modern family reunion. Yes. Well, it's for the good of the nation, darling. And the wheat harvest, of course. A particularly interesting detail about these relationships is the specific terminology the Egyptians employed. They often used titles like Great Royal Wife, Hemet Nesut Veret, which almost exclusively referred to women from the immediate royal family. This careful naming distinguished them from other consorts and highlighted their unique sacred status. What adds another layer of complexity is the occasional distinction between biological sisters and spiritual sisters, or those who were adopted into the royal family to fulfill specific roles. This nuance can make tracing these intricate family trees incredibly challenging for modern Egyptologists, like trying to untangle a particularly ancient and very naughty ball of divine yarn. Scholars continue to analyze whether all these unions were consummated in a physical sense, or if some were purely ceremonial, designed primarily to legitimize claims to the throne without necessarily involving intimate relations. Some researchers propose that in cases such as father-daughter unions, the marriage might have been largely symbolic, performed for specific religious rites, rather than as a literal conjugal partnership. Nevertheless, the underlying purpose remained clear: to solidify the pharaoh's divine power and ensure cosmic order. It makes you ponder what exactly the wedding vows would have entailed. Perhaps less for richer, for poorer, and more. I, Pharaoh, take thee, my sister, to be my divine partner in ensuring the Nile floods on time, and the sun remembers to rise each morning. A job description with unparalleled pressure. Wouldn't you agree? Having navigated the rather incestuous waters of royal bloodlines, you now drift deeper into the pharaoh's palace, where the grand harem life, power, and pleasure truly come into focus. Forget any simplistic notions of a gilded cage filled solely with compliant beauties. The pharaoh's harem was a complex ecosystem, a miniature society teeming with political intrigue, economic significance, and yes, intimate relationships. This wasn't just a place for the pharaoh to unwind after a long day of divine duties. It was a crucial administrative and social hub, a veritable corporate headquarters of domesticity, albeit one with significantly more perfumed oils and elaborate hairstyles. You see, the harem, often referred to as the Progeny or House of Seclusion, was a vast establishment. It wasn't always located within the main royal palace itself. Sometimes pharaohs built separate sprawling complexes specifically to house their wives, secondary wives, concubines, children, and the myriad of servants required to keep such an operation running smoothly. Imagine a self-contained village dedicated to supporting the pharaoh's intimate life and securing the succession. It had its own staff, administrators, storerooms, and even workshops where goods for the court were produced. This grand scale illustrates that the harem was far more than a recreational space. It was an economic engine and a training ground for future queens and princes. One fascinating historical insight revealing the sheer scale and importance of the harem comes from detailed administrative records, especially from the New Kingdom. These documents meticulously list the provisions sent to the harems, the number of women residing there, and even the extensive staff required to manage them. For instance, during the reign of Amenhotep III, his Malkata palace complex had expansive areas dedicated to housing his numerous wives and concubines, suggesting a highly organized system rather than a chaotic free-for-all. It's almost like running a very high-stakes, incredibly personal boarding school, isn't it? Except the students were royal consorts, and the headmaster was the pharaoh who would occasionally drop by for conjugal visits. Within these bustling walls, the social dynamics were incredibly intricate. While the great royal wife held the preeminent position, often acting as a key political and religious figure alongside the pharaoh, other principal wives and secondary wives also held significant status, particularly if they bore sons. These women were rarely just decorative figures. Many were highly educated, skilled in arts, music, and diplomacy. They could influence court decisions, engage in significant economic ventures, and on occasion even plot for power. A truly memorable example, a quirky tidbit from the annals of Egyptian history, is the famous harem conspiracy against Ramses III. In this dramatic plot, a secondary wife named Tae attempted to place her son Pentawere on the throne by assassinating the pharaoh. The conspiracy involved not only women of the harem, but also high-ranking officials and servants, vividly demonstrating the very real political power that simmered beneath the seemingly serene surface of royal domesticity. It certainly puts a whole new spin on family drama, doesn't it? Suddenly, your last Thanksgiving argument seems rather quaint. The precise interpretation of the term harem itself continues to be a point of scholarly discussion. Many experts suggest it carries too many Western Orientalist connotations of mere sexual servitude and prefer terms like royal household or women's quarters to better emphasize the broader administrative and social functions beyond just intimacy. These women, especially those of higher rank, often possessed their own estates, personal servants, and frequently wielded considerable influence through their children, thereby affecting the future of Egypt. You're not just looking at a collection of concubines here. You're observing a complex living web of alliances, rivalries, and aspirations, all intricately centered around the pharaoh's favor and the ultimate crucial goal of producing a legitimate heir. It was a pressure cooker of ambition, where a quietly spoken word at the opportune moment could genuinely alter the course of history, and a single misstep could lead to utter ruin. Imagine the intense social climbing, the subtle jostling for position, the endless unspoken competition to catch the eye of the man who held divine sway over their lives. It makes modern corporate ladder climbing look like a gentle stroll in the park. Leaving the complex social hierarchy of the harem behind, you now turn your gaze to the vast, often unseen network of concubines and servants who inhabited the pharaoh's world. While the great royal wife and other principal consorts held significant power and status, the sheer number of women who populated the royal household meant that many others played crucial roles, often without the same level of recognition or privilege. These were the women who kept the domestic machinery of the palace running, provided companionship, and sometimes, perhaps unexpectedly, found themselves at the heart of royal intrigues. You see, the term concubine in ancient Egypt didn't always carry the same negative connotations it might in some other historical contexts. While certainly not holding the legal or social standing of a primary wife, these women could still be highly valued. Many were daughters of high-ranking Egyptian officials or even foreign princesses sent as diplomatic gifts, forming crucial alliances between Egypt and other nations. Their status varied greatly from those who might share the pharaoh's bed for a night to others who became long-term companions, bore royal children, and even gained significant influence within the court. This was no monolithic group. It was a spectrum of relationships, often fluid and dependent on the pharaoh's favor and the political climate. It's a well-established historical fact that women of the harem often held titles related to administration or religious service, showcasing roles beyond mere domesticity. For instance, some concubines are documented as having served as priestesses in various cults, particularly those associated with fertility goddesses like Hathor. This indicates that their lives weren't solely defined by their relationship with the pharaoh. They had active roles within the larger societal and religious framework of the palace. Imagine being tasked with managing the royal linen one day, then performing a sacred rite for fertility the next, all while hoping to catch the pharaoh's eye. It was a multifaceted job description, to say the least. Beyond concubines, the palace was teeming with female servants, from chambermaids and wet nurses to musicians, dancers, and hairdressers. These women, while lower in social standing, were indispensable to the daily functioning of the royal household. They dressed the queens, prepared the food, entertained at banquets, and cared for the royal children. Their lives were intimately connected to the pharaoh's family, giving them unique insights into the private lives of the most powerful people in Egypt. A fascinating tidbit for those who love uncovering everyday life is the discovery of ostraca pottery shards used for writing from workers' villages near royal tombs. These fragments sometimes depict scenes of daily life, including women performing various domestic and service roles within larger households, offering tantalizing glimpses into the lives of the invisible women who supported the royal elite. Scholars continue to discuss whether the term concubine truly captures the nuanced relationships that existed, or if it's an oversimplification influenced by later cultures. Some suggest that many relationships were more akin to secondary marriages, especially when children were involved and acknowledged. The key distinction often lay in the mother's social status and whether her children were considered eligible for the throne. Regardless of terminology, these women often faced significant challenges. Their economic dependence on the pharaoh was absolute, and their social standing, while potentially elevated by royal favor, was inherently precarious. Remember that historical information you have about male concubines in ancient Greece facing social stigma and limited legal rights. While female concubines in ancient Egypt seem to have more varied statuses, they certainly lacked the protections afforded to primary wives. Their future was often tied to the fortunes of their children or the whims of the reigning monarch. It was a life that offered potential luxury but little true security, a constant dance on the edge of the royal spotlight. Think of it as a historical reality show where the stakes were literally life and death, and your confessional moments were potentially carved into tomb walls. From the intricate social webs of concubines and servants, our journey now plunges into the profound spiritual depths of ancient Egyptian royalty, ritual sex, and fertility cults. For the pharaohs, intimacy was often far more than personal pleasure, or even the practical necessity of producing heirs. It was a sacred act deeply interwoven with the very fabric of their religion and the cosmic order of their world. You're about to explore how the pharaoh's sexuality was seen as a direct conduit for divine power, essential for the prosperity of Egypt itself. Imagine a belief system where the pharaoh was not just a king, but a living god, a manifestation of the creator deities. His actions, including those in the bedroom, were believed to have direct repercussions on the natural world. If the pharaoh was virile and fertile, then so too would be the lands of Egypt, the waters of the Nile, and the harvests from the fields. This wasn't merely a quaint metaphor. It was a deeply held conviction that propelled many of their most important rituals. The pharaoh's ability to procreate was a direct reflection of his divine potency and his capability to ensure the welfare of his kingdom. It's like being responsible for the entire country's weather forecast, but with more personal investment. A pervasive historical fact illuminating this connection is the cult of Min, the ancient Egyptian god of fertility, procreation, and sexual potency. Min was often depicted with an erect penis holding a flail, symbolizing his generative power. Pharaohs were intimately linked with Min, sometimes participating in rituals directly involving his cult to reinforce their own fertility and the fertility of the land. During harvest festivals, the pharaoh might perform ceremonies dedicated to Min, ritually cutting the first sheaf of grain, an act symbolically linking his own virility to the abundance of the crops. It was a tangible, visible connection between the king's body and the nation's breadbasket. A truly fascinating, almost bizarre tidbit involves the concept of divine birth. Many pharaohs, particularly during the New Kingdom, propagated the idea that they were not merely born of human parents, but were the result of a divine union between their mother and a god, often Amun-Ra, who took on the form of the reigning pharaoh's father. This sacred marriage was depicted in temple reliefs showing the god embracing the queen, leading to the conception of the pharaoh. While clearly symbolic, these narratives served to legitimize the pharaoh's rule and emphasize his divine origins, essentially giving him a celestial birth certificate. It's the ultimate "my dad can beat up your dad" argument, except your dad is a cosmic deity. Scholars continue to analyze the extent to which these ritual sex practices were literal or purely symbolic. While the idea of a pharaoh ritually engaging in sexual acts for fertility is sometimes suggested, the evidence is often metaphorical or depicted in highly stylized art rather than explicit texts. However, the overarching theme remains. The pharaoh's personal fertility was intrinsically linked to the national well-being through a complex system of religious beliefs and ceremonial actions. This fusion of the intimate and the divine meant that every aspect of the pharaoh's sexuality held profound significance, ensuring not just a lineage of kings, but the very continuation of the Egyptian world. From the profound spiritual connections of ritual sex, we now venture into a more symbolic yet equally fascinating aspect of royal intimacy: animal symbolism in the royal bedroom. You might wonder what a roaring lion or a slithering cobra has to do with the pharaoh's private life. But in ancient Egypt, the animal kingdom was a rich tapestry of metaphors, and their attributes were frequently invoked to describe and empower the pharaoh, particularly in matters of virility and protection within the royal household. Imagine a culture where every creature held a deeper meaning, where the fierce power of a bull or the watchful gaze of a falcon spoke volumes. These animalistic qualities weren't just observed. They were absorbed into the pharaoh's identity, especially when it came to his generative capabilities and the safeguarding of his family. The bedroom, much like the throne room, became a space infused with these powerful symbolic representations, acting as both a visual affirmation and a magical ward. It is a widely accepted historical understanding that various animals were seen as embodiments of specific deities or abstract concepts. For instance, the bull was a pervasive symbol of strength and virility, directly linked to male potency and the pharaoh's ability to ensure abundance. The pharaoh himself was often referred to by titles like Strong Bull, emphasizing his immense power and procreative vigor. You might see depictions of bulls or their horns in contexts associated with fertility or royal power. It's a bit like calling someone a tiger in the boardroom, but for, well, slightly more intimate settings. No wonder they always look so confident in their statues. A truly captivating, perhaps even quirky tidbit involves the use of amulets and protective symbols in the shape of animals placed within royal residences, or even worn by the pharaoh and his consorts. Consider the cobra uraeus on the pharaoh's crown, a fierce protector that would spit fire at his enemies. While primarily a public symbol of divine authority, its protective essence extended to the private sphere, guarding the pharaoh and his family, including during vulnerable moments of intimacy. Another intriguing example is the hippopotamus goddess Taweret, depicted with a fearsome hippo head, lioness limbs, and human breasts. She was a benevolent deity of childbirth and fertility, and her image was often found in domestic settings, including within royal quarters, to protect pregnant women and newborn children. Imagine trying to explain to your spouse that you're wearing a hippo amulet to ensure a good night's sleep. The precise role of some animal symbols within the literal royal bedroom still invites scholarly discussion. Were these just general protective and virility symbols, or did they have more direct, specific applications related to intimate acts? While explicit texts detailing animal-inspired sexual rituals are rare, the overarching symbolism points to a deep cultural belief in harnessing the power of the animal kingdom to enhance fertility, ensure protection, and legitimize the pharaoh's divine role in procreation. The ancient Egyptians had a knack for weaving the sacred into every thread of their lives, and the most personal spaces were no exception. So next time you see a statue of a pharaoh, remember that beneath the stoic gaze, there was a man whose very intimate life was believed to embody the strength of a bull and the protective might of a cobra. Stepping away from the animalistic symbolism, you now enter a realm where hope and anxiety converged. Amulets and charms for love. In ancient Egypt, where life was fragile and the continuation of the lineage paramount, magic wasn't just for priests or grand rituals. It permeated daily life, particularly when it came to matters of the heart, desire, and fertility. For the pharaoh and his consorts, ensuring conception and fostering affection was often bolstered by an array of magical objects and spoken incantations. Imagine the pressure on a royal couple to produce an heir. Beyond the physical act, there was an intense spiritual and psychological component. If conception seemed delayed, or if a pharaoh wished to secure the affection of a particular consort, they wouldn't just rely on nature. They would turn to a fascinating collection of small, potent objects and whispered spells, believing these could influence the unseen forces governing love and fertility. This was less about grand dramatic curses and more about intimate personal interventions in the unpredictable currents of human desire. It's a well-documented historical observation that amulets were ubiquitous in ancient Egypt, worn by people of all social strata for protection, luck, and specific magical purposes. Among these, many were explicitly designed for matters of love, sexuality, and especially fertility. Common examples include scarab beetles, symbolizing regeneration and rebirth, which were often worn by women hoping to conceive. There were also amulets in the shape of the Tayat knot associated with the goddess Isis, believed to offer protection and life-giving power, or small figures of Bes, the dwarf deity associated with childbirth, fertility, and pleasure. These weren't just pretty trinkets. They were believed to be active magical conduits, little portable power-ups for your love life. A particularly intriguing, almost whimsical tidbit concerns the love spells inscribed on papyri or ostraca. These weren't just for the royals, but for anyone seeking romantic advantage. Some spells were designed to cause a woman to come after a man, often involving complex rituals, special oils, and the invocation of deities like Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. Others were more specific, aimed at making someone fall madly in love. While we don't have direct evidence of a pharaoh casting a love spell on a specific queen, it's highly probable that such magical practices were consulted within the royal household given the high stakes of royal marriages. Imagine a love triangle playing out with magical charms instead of dramatic confrontations. Oh, he gave her a fertility amulet. I'll counter with a charm for unwavering devotion. The ancient Egyptian version of competitive gift-giving. The effectiveness of these charms, of course, is a matter that continues to spark discussion among scholars. Were they genuinely believed to alter fate? Or did they primarily serve as psychological tools, providing comfort and a sense of agency in an often uncontrollable world? Perhaps they functioned much like a placebo effect, bolstering confidence and alleviating anxiety in the individuals who used them. Regardless, their widespread use speaks volumes about the ancient Egyptian belief in the interconnectedness of the spiritual and the physical, and their reliance on magic to navigate the most intimate and vital aspects of life, ensuring not just personal happiness, but the very continuity of the divine pharaonic line. From the intricate world of charms and amulets, you now move into a more practical, albeit often equally strange aspect of royal life: medical practices for sexual health. Even for god-kings, the challenges of ensuring potency and fertility were very real. The ancient Egyptians, with their surprisingly advanced medical knowledge, didn't rely solely on magic. They also developed a range of physical remedies, some quite sensible, others less so, to maintain the pharaoh's vital role in procreation. Imagine the immense pressure on the pharaoh to produce healthy heirs. It wasn't just about fathering children. It was about demonstrating his divine vitality and ensuring the stability of the entire kingdom. When issues of sexual performance or fertility arose, the royal physicians, highly skilled and respected figures, would be called upon. Their methods were a fascinating blend of empirical observation, herbal lore, and sometimes a touch of what we might call folk medicine. It's a foundational historical fact that ancient Egypt possessed a remarkably sophisticated understanding of medicine, as evidenced by numerous medical papyri like the Ebers Papyrus and the Kahun Papyrus. These texts detailed diagnosis, prognosis, and treatments for a wide array of ailments, including those related to the reproductive system. For example, some sections provide remedies for male impotence, often involving mixtures of honey, various plants, and even animal parts. One documented prescription for improving male potency involved consuming specific types of bread mixed with herbs. While we might question the ingredients today, the intent was clearly to address physiological concerns through what they considered scientific means. A particularly quirky tidbit found in these ancient texts includes prescriptions for increasing a woman's fertility that involved rather unappealing concoctions. One such remedy suggested a paste made from dates, beer, and, believe it or not, goose fat to be inserted vaginally. The idea was likely to create a more hospitable environment for conception, though the comfort level of the royal consort during such treatments is left to your imagination. Another example involves fumigating a woman with incense and specific herbs to stimulate fertility. It certainly sounds like a unique spa day, doesn't it? Perhaps not the relaxing kind. The effectiveness of these ancient remedies, much like the magical charms, is something that continues to be a subject of academic inquiry. Were these treatments genuinely effective, perhaps due to undiscovered pharmacological properties of the herbs, or did they primarily offer psychological reassurance? Many scholars believe it was a combination of both. The physicians were keen observers and experimenters, but their understanding of biology was intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. They likely approached sexual health with the same holistic view they applied to other illnesses, considering both the body and the unseen forces that could affect it. So, while you might not rush to try a goose-fat fertility paste, it reminds us of the desperate and creative measures taken to ensure the pharaoh's ability to fulfill his sacred duty of bringing forth new life into the world. Moving beyond the practical, if sometimes peculiar medical remedies, you now delve into the very essence of the pharaohs being pharaohs and their gods. Sacred unions. For the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. He was the living embodiment of Horus. And through ritual and belief, he could even merge with other powerful deities, particularly those associated with creation and fertility. This wasn't mere symbolic flattery. It was a profound theological concept that underpinned his authority and his unique role in maintaining cosmic order. Imagine a king whose very existence was intertwined with the divine. The pharaoh was the intermediary between humanity and the gods, responsible for performing rituals that ensured the sun rose, the Nile flooded, and the world remained in balance. This responsibility extended to his personal life, where his procreative acts were seen as mimicking the creative acts of the gods themselves. His intimate unions were not simply human interactions, but reflections of divine processes, making his bedroom a microcosm of the celestial realm. A fundamental historical tenet of Egyptian kingship was the concept of the divine birth of the pharaoh. As mentioned earlier, this belief held that the pharaoh was conceived not just by his earthly father, but by a god, most commonly Amun-Ra, who assumed the form of the reigning pharaoh's father for the sacred union with the queen mother. This sacred marriage was depicted in exquisite detail on temple walls such as at the Luxor Temple, where reliefs show Amun-Ra embracing Queen Mutemwia, the mother of Amenhotep III, signifying the divine conception of the future king. These scenes were not just propaganda. They were theological statements affirming the pharaoh's unique God-given right to rule. It's the ultimate "I got it from my dad" story. Only Dad is the supreme creator deity of the universe. A particularly intriguing, almost mystical tidbit relates to the pharaoh's identification with the god Osiris after death, and sometimes even in life. Osiris was the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and fertility. Through ritual, especially funerary contexts, the pharaoh was believed to become one with Osiris, experiencing a regeneration that mirrored the god's own rebirth. This identification meant that the pharaoh's own journey through death and rebirth was linked to the endless cycle of life and fertility, solidifying his role as a perpetual source of creation, even beyond the earthly realm. It's like getting a spiritual promotion after you pass on with added fertility benefits. The precise nature of these sacred unions continues to be a rich area of academic debate. Were there actual ritualistic acts that mirrored sexual intercourse between the pharaoh and a priestess representing a goddess? Or was it purely symbolic and metaphorical? While direct evidence of literal sacred sexual acts in temples is scarce and often open to interpretation, the pervasive ideology of the pharaoh as a divine consort or the embodiment of generative deities strongly suggests that his intimate life was viewed through this sacred lens. The emphasis was on the pharaoh's role as the earthly manifestation of divine creative power, ensuring the unending flow of life from the heavens to the fertile black lands of Egypt. It tells you that for the pharaoh, even the most private moments were part of a grand cosmic performance. From the celestial unions with gods, we now shift our focus to a remarkable earthly ritual that aimed to rejuvenate the pharaoh's very essence. The Sed Festival, a rejuvenation jubilee. This wasn't just a party, it was a jubilee of immense importance. A highly choreographed performance designed to magically and ritually renew the pharaoh's physical strength, spiritual vitality, and crucially his reproductive potency after decades on the throne. Imagine ruling for 30 years in a land where your personal health and vigor were directly linked to the prosperity of the entire nation. By the time a pharaoh reached this significant milestone, perhaps he wasn't quite as spry as he once was. The Sed Festival, typically held after a pharaoh had reigned for 30 years and then every 3 years thereafter, was the ancient Egyptian solution to this aging dilemma. It was a spectacular public display, a grand pageant meant to demonstrate to both gods and mortals that the pharaoh was still fit to rule, still imbued with divine energy, and still capable of ensuring Egypt's continued fertility and stability. Think of it as the ultimate royal performance review with literally cosmic stakes. A pervasive historical observation about the Sed Festival is its emphasis on rituals symbolizing regeneration and rebirth. The pharaoh would engage in various ceremonial acts, often involving running courses around boundary markers to prove his physical prowess and ability to control the land. He would also undergo multiple symbolic coronations, reaffirming his kingship over both Upper and Lower Egypt. These actions weren't just for show. They were believed to magically restore his vitality, making him young and vigorous once more. It's almost like a full-body spiritual reboot, ensuring the king was still operating at peak divine performance. A particularly intriguing, almost comical tidbit involves the pharaoh's ritual attire during the festival. At various points, he would wear different costumes, some of which were quite archaic, hearkening back to the earliest dynasties. This sartorial journey through time symbolized his connection to all past rulers and the enduring nature of kingship. In some depictions, the pharaoh is shown wearing a unique, close-fitting cloak, sometimes interpreted as a symbol of his renewed physical and sexual vigor. Imagine trying to look dignified while doing a ritual jog in an ancient, tight outfit. Perhaps it was the ultimate test of confidence. While the exact nature of any directly sexual rituals within the Sed Festival remains a subject of scholarly discussion, the underlying theme of renewed potency is undeniable. Many scholars propose that the entire festival, by demonstrating the pharaoh's renewed physical and spiritual strength, implicitly affirmed his renewed reproductive capabilities. It was a holistic rejuvenation encompassing his political, religious, and indeed his physical and sexual being. The festival served as a powerful public statement that the pharaoh, despite the passage of time, remained the vital, fertile heart of Egypt, ready to continue guiding his people and ensuring the unending flow of life from the divine realm to the land of the Nile. It was a spectacle of endurance, tradition, and perhaps a subtle magical hint that the royal stock was still very much in business. Stepping away from the grand spectacle of the Sed Festival, your exploration now takes a more intimate turn, delving into the surprisingly expressive world of love poetry and erotic literature. You might imagine a rigid, austere society focused solely on gods and death. But ancient Egypt possessed a vibrant culture that celebrated human emotion, including passion, longing, and desire, often with remarkable frankness. Imagine sitting by the Nile, the scent of lotus blossoms heavy in the air, and listening to verses that speak of aching hearts and stolen kisses. While not explicit in the modern sense, These ancient poems and songs reveal a society that understood and articulated the complexities of romantic and sexual attraction. They offer a rare glimpse into the personal lives of Egyptians, showing that beneath the layers of ritual and divine duty, there were individuals experiencing the universal pangs of love and lust. It's a foundational historical truth that ancient Egyptian literature included a genre specifically dedicated to love songs and poems, often found on papyrus scrolls or ostraca from sites like Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders. These texts, dating primarily from the New Kingdom, tell tales of young lovers, their anxieties, their desires, and their dreams. The language is often vivid and sensual, using natural imagery to evoke feelings of attraction. For example, a lover might describe his beloved as a gazelle or a twig of myrrh, praising her beauty and inviting her to join him. This shows a culture that wasn't afraid to express romantic and even suggestive sentiments openly through verse. A truly charming, almost cheeky tidbit is how these poems often featured dialogues between lovers, sometimes with an almost playful back and forth. One popular theme involved a young man or woman sneaking out to meet their beloved, despite warnings from their parents. "My heart fluttered when I saw you," one poem might declare, while another describes the thrill of a secret rendezvous in a garden with hints of physical intimacy. There are also references to drinking, feasting, and enjoying life's pleasures, often as part of the courtship. It's like reading the lyrics to ancient pop songs, complete with youthful rebellion and yearning. Makes you wonder if they had their own version of Netflix and chill back then. The precise interpretation of how erotic these texts truly are continues to be a point of academic fascination. While some scholars emphasize their innocent romantic nature, others point to underlying sexual implications and double entendres that would have been clear to a contemporary audience. For example, references to entering the garden or crossing the river could subtly hint at sexual encounters without explicitly stating them. What's clear, however, is that these poems provided a sanctioned outlet for expressing deep personal desires, a reminder that even in a society obsessed with divine order, human passion found its voice beautifully and often with a mischievous twinkle in its eye. From the lyrical expressions of earthly love, you now transition to a more profound and enduring aspect of Egyptian belief: sexualized rites and the afterlife. You might find it surprising that a culture so focused on death and the preservation of the body also imbued its funerary practices with strong sexual and regenerative symbolism. For the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife wasn't just a spiritual journey. It was a continuation of life, albeit in a perfected form, and procreation was essential even beyond the tomb. Imagine a world where death was not an end, but a transition, a rebirth into eternity. To achieve this eternal existence, the deceased needed to be regenerated, much like Osiris, the god of the underworld, who was dismembered and then magically reassembled to live again. This concept of regeneration often carried distinct sexual undertones, emphasizing the power of creation even in the face of mortality. The tomb, far from being a desolate resting place, was envisioned as a womb, a place of rebirth from which the deceased would emerge into the eternal day. It's a foundational historical concept that Osiris, the god of the dead, was also a powerful fertility deity. His myth involved his magical resurrection by his sister wife Isis, who conceived their son Horus after his death, symbolizing regeneration from destruction. This divine narrative directly influenced funerary practices. The deceased pharaoh in particular was identified with Osiris. This identification meant that the pharaoh, even in death, was believed to retain his procreative power, ensuring his continued existence and the cycle of life. You can find depictions of Osiris often portrayed with an erect phallus in funerary contexts, symbolizing his regenerative capacity and triumph over death. It's a rather explicit symbol of eternal life, isn't it? A permanent reminder that even in the afterlife, things can still be perky. A truly fascinating, albeit slightly macabre tidbit involves the placement of specific amulets, or even certain organs in mummification. While the heart was crucial and the brain often removed, some theories suggest that in certain periods or for specific individuals, particular care was given to ensuring the pharaoh's regenerative capabilities remained intact for the afterlife. Moreover, grave goods often included items related to rejuvenation or pleasure. Another quirky detail is the presence of miniature servant figures known as shabtis placed in tombs, sometimes depicted preparing food or even playing musical instruments, hinting at a desire for all earthly pleasures, including companionship, to continue into eternity. It suggests they were planning quite a lively existence in the great beyond. The precise interpretation of how sexualized these rites truly were continues to be a point of academic discussion. Was the symbolism purely metaphorical, or did it reflect a belief in literal reanimation of procreative functions in the afterlife? Most scholars lean towards a symbolic interpretation, emphasizing regeneration over literal sexual acts in the tomb. However, the pervasive imagery and explicit link to deities of fertility and rebirth highlight that for the ancient Egyptians, the continuation of life, even after death, was deeply intertwined with the fundamental power of creation. The tomb was not just a door to the afterlife. It was a cosmic incubator, awaiting the rebirth of the God-King into eternity, ensuring the cycle of existence would never truly cease. From the solemn yet regenerative mysteries of funerary rites, you now pivot to a more playful and perhaps surprising aspect of ancient Egyptian court life: cross-dressing and gender fluidity. You might assume a culture as seemingly rigid and traditional as ancient Egypt would have very strict, unchanging gender roles. However, evidence, though subtle and open to various interpretations, suggests that these roles could sometimes be playfully or ritually blurred, even within royal contexts. This isn't about modern gender identity, but about how ancient Egyptians expressed and perceived gender in ways that might challenge our contemporary expectations. Imagine a world where the boundaries of identity were less fixed than we might assume, where performance and symbolism allowed for a fluidity of expression. While male and female roles were generally distinct in public life, particularly concerning kingship and domesticity, there were moments and contexts where these lines seemed to soften, offering glimpses into a more nuanced understanding of gender. It's a noteworthy historical observation that certain deities and mythical figures exhibited aspects of gender fluidity or androgyny. For example, the god Hapi, the personification of the Nile's inundation, was often depicted with male features, beard, robust body, but also with pendulous breasts, symbolizing his nourishing, life-giving abundance, much like a mother. Similarly, some creation myths describe primordial deities as self-gendered or combining both male and female principles to bring forth the world. This divine precedent could have influenced human perceptions of gender roles, allowing for occasional blurring, especially in ritual. A truly intriguing, perhaps even quirky tidbit involves the occasional depiction of pharaohs in clothing or with attributes traditionally associated with the opposite gender. While female pharaohs like Hatshepsut famously adopted male regalia, including a false beard, to assert their authority, there are also rarer instances of male figures, potentially including pharaohs, being depicted in more feminized forms, or even wearing traditionally female garments in specific ritual contexts. One could interpret this as a symbolic act to embody both male and female creative principles, thus enhancing their divine power and universal authority. It's like saying, "I'm so powerful, I embody everyone." Or perhaps, "My fashion sense is simply ahead of its time." The precise meaning and extent of cross-dressing or gender fluidity in these ancient contexts continue to be actively discussed by scholars. Was it a literal practice, a symbolic act, or purely an artistic convention? Many experts emphasize the symbolic nature, suggesting that such depictions serve to underscore the pharaoh's multifaceted role as a divine ruler who transcended conventional human categories, encompassing all aspects of creation. It wasn't necessarily about personal sexual identity in the modern sense, but about expressing a holistic power that incorporated both masculine and feminine generative forces. So, while you might not find a pride parade in ancient Egypt, you might encounter a pharaoh who understood that true power lay in embracing the totality of existence, even if it meant occasionally donning a ceremonial skirt or a divine set of breasts. From the intriguing blurring of gender lines, you now find yourself peering into the silent narratives of ancient tombs, where tomb art holds hidden messages of desire come to light. You might think tomb paintings are solely about the deceased's journey to the afterlife or grand heroic deeds. But a closer look often reveals subtle and sometimes not so subtle elements hinting at passion, procreation, and the continuation of earthly pleasures in eternity. Imagine descending into the cool, dark embrace of a tomb, flashlight beams sweeping across vibrant frescoes. These were not just static historical records. They were blueprints for the afterlife, magical canvases meant to ensure the deceased's eternal well-being. And for the ancient Egyptians, a full and happy eternal life often included companionship, family, and the very act of creation itself, leading to nuanced depictions of desire woven into the fabric of these sacred spaces. It's a foundational aspect of Egyptian tomb art that its primary purpose was to ensure the deceased's comfortable and prosperous existence in the afterlife. This meant depicting everything they would need or desire: abundant food, loyal servants, family members, and scenes of earthly enjoyment. Within this framework, imagery related to fertility and procreation naturally found its place. For example, scenes of banquets often feature couples embracing or holding hands, subtly hinting at intimate bonds that were hoped to continue eternally. The emphasis was always on life, abundance, and regeneration, even in the context of death. A particularly insightful, perhaps even saucy tidbit lies in the symbolism of specific plants and animals within these tomb scenes. The lotus flower, for instance, a common motif, was not only beautiful, but also a powerful symbol of rebirth and creation, rising anew from the muddy waters each day. It often appeared in scenes associated with banquets or offerings, its delicate beauty subtly linked to fertility and the blossoming of life and love. Similarly, certain birds like the pigeon were sometimes associated with erotic longing and love poetry and could appear in seemingly innocuous scenes with an underlying suggestive meaning to those who understood the code. It's like their version of a romantic emoji hidden in plain sight. You have to wonder what other subtle hints were still missing. The degree to which these hidden messages of desire were truly explicit continues to be a point of careful consideration among Egyptologists. While some scholars emphasize the purely symbolic and regenerative aspects, others argue for a more direct interpretation of erotic undertones, especially given the frankness of some love poetry from the New Kingdom. The art often used allusion and metaphor rather than outright depiction, but the intent was clear: to ensure the deceased enjoyed a vibrant, sensual, and fertile existence forever. So the next time you see a tomb painting, remember that beneath the serene surface, there might be a silent story of desire, a wish for eternal passion forever preserved on the walls of the dead, transitioning from the symbolic whispers of tomb art You now ascend to the very pinnacle of power, examining the queen's power and sexual agency. While often viewed through the lens of their pharaonic husbands, ancient Egyptian queens, particularly the great royal wives, were far from mere passive figures in the royal bedroom or the political arena. They wielded significant influence, asserted their authority, and often played crucial roles in ensuring the succession and stability of the realm, sometimes even using their intimate relationships as a tool of statecraft. Imagine a queen who wasn't just a consort, but a vital partner in divine rule. These women were not simply mothers of heirs. Many were priestesses, administrators, and even regents, stepping into the void when a pharaoh was too young or incapacitated. Their power wasn't always explicit in terms of military command, but it was deeply woven into the religious and social fabric of Egypt. This meant their personal agency, including their sexuality, was often intertwined with their public role. It is a well-documented historical fact that many queens held immense religious and administrative titles reflecting their active involvement in the state. For instance, queens often served as God's wife of Amun, a powerful religious office that granted them significant economic and political clout. Nefertari, the beloved wife of Ramses II, not only received a magnificent tomb in the Valley of the Queens, but was also depicted in temples on an almost equal footing with her husband, participating in religious rituals and holding high esteem. This showcases that the queen's role extended far beyond just the royal bedroom. She was a vital co-ruler in many respects, even if the pharaoh remained the ultimate authority. A particularly striking and perhaps even controversial tidbit concerns the concept of the queen as the symbolic mother of the divine king. In the narrative of divine birth, it was the queen who was embraced by the god Amun-Ra to conceive the future pharaoh. This elevated her status tremendously, giving her a unique divine connection and validating the king's legitimacy. In some instances, like with Queen Hatshepsut though, she was a female pharaoh herself, not a queen consort in the typical sense. Her divine birth narrative was heavily emphasized to legitimize her unprecedented rule. This gave queens, even in their intimate role, a powerful narrative tool. Imagine being able to say, "My son, oh, he's literally conceived by a god. What about yours?" It's a mic drop moment in ancient history. The extent of a queen's sexual agency within the confines of an arranged royal marriage and a polygamous system is a nuanced topic that continues to invite scholarly discussion. While formal ceremonies were not the norm in ancient Egyptian weddings, the union was formalized when the bride moved her belongings into the groom's home and arranged marriages were common. However, evidence suggests that love and affection were also valued in these unions. Queens certainly used their position to promote their children, their own families, and sometimes even to exert political pressure. Some scholars believe that a queen's influence could extend to guiding the pharaoh in matters of succession, choosing future consorts for their sons, or even subtly affecting the political alliances shaped by marriage. Therefore, the queen was not just a recipient of the pharaoh's desires, but a powerful player in her own right, navigating the complexities of court life with intelligence, piety, and often an undeniable strategic prowess. From the formidable influence of the queen, you now pivot to a realm where intimacy met international diplomacy, pharaohs, and foreign princesses. You might imagine the pharaoh's marriages were solely internal affairs focused on maintaining a pure royal bloodline. However, strategic alliances with neighboring powers often required a different kind of union, bringing foreign princesses into the royal harem and introducing diverse sexual customs and cultural perspectives into the heart of Egypt. Imagine a world where marriage was a tool of statecraft, a bond forged not just for love or heirs, but for peace treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. The pharaohs, powerful as they were, understood the value of diplomatic relations. Sending a daughter to a foreign court or receiving one was a profound act of trust and alliance, often accompanied by lavish gifts and intricate negotiations. These foreign princesses brought with them not only their personal belongings, but also their customs, their languages, and perhaps even their own ideas about royal intimacy. It's a widely acknowledged historical reality that diplomatic marriages were a common feature of the Late Bronze Age, roughly 1550 to 1200 BCE, a period of intense international interaction. The Amarna letters, a collection of cuneiform tablets discovered in Egypt, provide fascinating correspondence between Egyptian pharaohs and other rulers of the Near East, detailing requests for and exchanges of royal women. Pharaohs like Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten married numerous foreign princesses from kingdoms such as Mitanni, Babylonia, and Assyria. These unions were crucial for maintaining stability and trade routes across the ancient world. You can almost hear the royal scribes drafting the marriage contracts, meticulously listing dowries and diplomatic courtesies, while the princesses themselves might have been quite nervous about their new distant homes. A particularly intriguing, almost comical tidbit is the reluctance of some foreign rulers to send their own daughters to Egypt. The reason? Egyptian pharaohs rarely, if ever, sent their own daughters abroad in return. This was seen as a grave insult by some foreign kings, leading to diplomatic squabbles. "You want my daughter, but you won't give me yours?" One king might have fumed, indicating Egypt's superior status. So while foreign princesses arrived in great numbers, Egyptian princesses remained firmly within the Nile Valley, preserving the perceived purity of the pharaonic bloodline. At least from their perspective, it's like a royal dating app with a very clear, slightly unfair one-way travel policy. The cultural impact of these unions on the pharaoh's court, especially regarding intimate customs, is an area that continues to be examined by scholars. Did these foreign consorts introduce new forms of entertainment, new perfumed oils, or even new sexual practices? While explicit details are scarce, it's plausible that the diverse backgrounds of these women enriched the cultural tapestry of the harem. They would have brought their own languages, music, and traditions, undoubtedly influencing the daily life and perhaps even the intimate rituals within the royal household. This influx of international women meant the pharaoh's private life was not just about Egyptian customs. It was a fascinating crossroads of ancient world cultures, all converging in the palatial chambers of the god king. From the intricate diplomatic dance of foreign marriages, you now journey into one of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic periods, centering on the enigma of Akhenaten's family life. This pharaoh who revolutionized Egyptian religion by promoting the worship of a single sun disk, the Aten, also presents a fascinating and often debated picture of royal intimacy that challenges conventional norms. His relationships, particularly with his great royal wife Nefertiti and other royal women, have fueled centuries of speculation, making his domestic sphere as mysterious as his theology. Imagine a pharaoh who dared to shatter millennia of tradition, moving the capital to a new city, Akhenaten, modern Amarna, and focusing all worship on a singular abstract deity. This radical shift wasn't confined to religion. It seems to have permeated his personal and family life too, as depicted in the art of the Amarna period. Unlike earlier, more rigid royal portrayals, Akhenaten's family scenes are remarkably informal and affectionate, showing the pharaoh, Nefertiti, and their daughters interacting with a tender intimacy rarely seen before or after his reign. It's a foundational historical observation that Amarna art depicts an unprecedented level of royal familial intimacy. You often see Akhenaten and Nefertiti kissing, holding hands, or playing with their daughters. This contrasts sharply with the stiff, formal representations of earlier pharaohs. These depictions, bathed in the rays of the A10, suggest a strong bond within the core royal family, a departure from the more detached imagery of previous dynasties. It's like watching a royal reality show centuries before cameras were even invented, giving you a rare glimpse into a pharaoh's actual day-to-day interactions. A particularly intriguing and widely discussed tidbit concerns the relationship between Akhenaten and Kia, a secondary wife who suddenly appears in the archaeological record, seemingly after Nefertiti's prominence wanes, and then just as suddenly disappears. Kia is often depicted in a similar intimate style to Nefertiti, and some scholars suggest she might have been the mother of Tutankhamun. Her presence and the mystery surrounding her fate add another layer of complexity to Akhenaten's family arrangements. Was she a favorite consort who filled a void, or a political figure whose influence faded quickly? The limited information available about her raises more questions than answers about the pharaoh's intimate choices. It's like finding a few missing pages from a very juicy royal diary. The precise nature of Akhenaten's various relationships and the implications for his family life continue to be a vigorous point of scholarly discussion. Was there a period of shared rule with Nefertiti where she even adopted kingly titles? Did Akhenaten engage in intimate relationships with his own daughters, as some interpretations of fragmented art suggest? Though this is highly controversial and often dismissed as misinterpretation of symbolic art or confusion with divine birth narratives, some scholars argue that the art is highly stylized, emphasizing a new theological concept of family and creation rather than strictly literal depictions of sexual relations. Others point to the fact that Akhenaten certainly had multiple daughters, implying a prolific conjugal life, even if the details remain obscure. What's undeniable is that Akhenaten's revolutionary spirit extended into the most personal corners of his life, leaving us with a captivating, if incomplete, puzzle of royal intimacy. From the enigmatic family dynamics of Akhenaten, our journey now brings you to his most famous successor, a pharaoh whose very tomb defined Egypt for the modern world, Tutankhamun's legacy, health, and harem. You might know him as the Boy King, but beyond the golden mask and countless treasures, examinations of his mummy and the context of his brief reign offer intriguing, often poignant insights into his physical condition and its potential implications for his private and marital life. Imagine being thrust onto the throne as a child, inheriting a kingdom still reeling from your predecessor's radical religious reforms. Tutankhamun's reign, though short, was dedicated to restoring traditional polytheistic worship. But his personal story, tragically cut short, is deeply informed by his physical vulnerabilities. Modern scientific analyses of his remains have painted a picture of a young pharaoh plagued by ill health, which inevitably sparks questions about his ability to fulfill the crucial royal duty of producing heirs. It's a well-established historical fact, confirmed by extensive CT scans and DNA analysis of his mummy, that Tutankhamun suffered from numerous physical ailments. He had a severe clubfoot, likely walked with a cane, and endured multiple bouts of malaria. These conditions, combined with genetic issues stemming from royal inbreeding as he was the son of Akhenaten and Akhenaten's sister, suggest a young man who was likely in constant pain and certainly not in peak physical condition. This medical profile naturally leads to inquiries about his personal life and his capacity to father children, a paramount expectation for any pharaoh. A particularly poignant and widely discussed tidbit involves the discovery of two mummified fetuses in Tutankhamun's tomb, believed to be his stillborn daughters. This highly unusual find speaks volumes about his marital life with Akhenaten, his half-sister. The presence of these fetuses suggests that despite his physical challenges, Tutankhamun and his queen were indeed attempting to produce heirs, but tragically failed. This detail, more than any other, gives a glimpse into the emotional weight and personal struggle faced by the young royal couple in their fundamental duty to secure the dynasty's future. It paints a human picture of their hopes and heartbreaks far removed from the stoic facade of pharaonic statues. The precise state of Tutankhamun's sexual health and his capacity to effectively consummate his marriage remains an area that continues to invite scholarly discussion. While his deformities and illnesses would undoubtedly have impacted his overall well-being and possibly his fertility, the presence of the fetuses confirms that procreation was attempted. Some scholars hypothesize that the repeated miscarriages or stillbirths could be linked to the severe genetic issues stemming from generations of close kin marriages within the royal family. Regardless of the exact medical specifics, Tutankhamun's tragic personal story underscores the immense pressure on pharaohs to reproduce, highlighting the intersection of royal health, intimate duty, and the very survival of the kingdom. His legacy, therefore, isn't just about golden glory, but also about the very human struggles of a young ruler burdened by the weight of divine expectation and a fragile body. From the poignant, fragile legacy of Tutankhamun, we now catapult through time to the reign of arguably Egypt's most prolific and self-aggrandizing pharaoh, Ramses the Great, a prolific lover. You might know him from his colossal statues and monumental temples, but beyond his architectural ambitions, Ramses II was also legendary for his extraordinary number of wives, concubines, and most famously his astonishing multitude of children. He truly lived up to the divine expectation of a pharaoh as a fountain of life. Imagine a ruler who not only commanded vast armies and built sprawling cities, but also managed to preside over a family that could fill its own small town. Ramses II reigned for an incredible 66 years, from 1279 to 1213 BCE, providing him ample time to solidify his lineage and populate his court. His sheer longevity, combined with the Egyptian emphasis on large families as a sign of blessing and power, allowed him to become an unparalleled patriarch in royal history. He was, in essence, the ultimate dynastic overachiever. It's an undisputed historical fact that Ramses II boasted an exceptionally large family, with evidence suggesting he fathered over 100 children, possibly even more. This remarkable feat is documented through numerous reliefs and inscriptions that list his sons and daughters, often showing them participating in ceremonies or standing in procession behind him. His most prominent queen was Nefertari, but he had several other great royal wives, including Isetnefret, and a vast harem of secondary wives and concubines. The sheer scale of his progeny solidified his image as a truly virile and divinely blessed pharaoh capable of ensuring the continuity of the royal line for generations. He wasn't just building temples for himself. He was building a literal dynasty. A truly captivating, almost amusing tidbit about Ramses II is the naming conventions for his children. He had so many that he essentially started recycling names. Many of his sons were named Rameses, Meremta, Amunherhepeshef, or Kemwaset, leading to a rather confusing family tree for modern historians. Imagine trying to keep track of everyone at a family dinner when half your cousins share the same name. Hey, Ramses? No, not that Ramses, the other one. It must have been an absolute nightmare for the palace scribes trying to keep accurate records. One can only assume his private life was just as energetically organized as his public works. The social and political implications of such a vast royal family continue to be a subject of academic exploration. How did such a multitude of children, especially sons, impact succession planning? While the eldest son of the great royal wife usually held precedence, having so many legitimate claimants could also create competition and intrigue, as seen in later periods of Egyptian history. Despite the potential for internal squabbles, Ramses II's extraordinary procreative success served as a powerful symbol of his divine favor and the robust health of the Egyptian state under his reign. His legacy wasn't just etched in stone. It was quite literally embodied in a sprawling lineage that spoke volumes about the vigor of Ramses the Great and the boundless blessings of the gods upon Egypt. He was quite simply the ancient world's most successful family man. From the epic virility of Ramses the Great, we leap forward in time to the very twilight of ancient Egyptian independence, encountering its most famous and perhaps most infamous final ruler, Cleopatra's allure and political power. You might know her as the seductive queen who captivated Roman emperors, but her intimate relationships were far more than mere romance. They were calculated acts of diplomacy and strategic maneuvering, a testament to her sharp political mind and a desperate bid to preserve her kingdom. Imagine a queen descended from a long line of Greek pharaohs facing the immense might of the burgeoning Roman Republic. Cleopatra VII. Philopator was not primarily a beauty icon as often portrayed, but a brilliant multilingual and charismatic politician who understood that personal connections could be the most potent weapons in her arsenal. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony were not accidental trysts. They were meticulously planned gambits to secure military and economic support against rival factions and the encroaching Roman power. Her intimate life was, in essence, an extension of her foreign policy. It's a foundational historical fact that Cleopatra forged crucial political alliances through her relationships with powerful Roman leaders. Her liaison with Julius Caesar resulted in the birth of their son Caesarion, whom she hoped would one day rule Rome and Egypt, creating a powerful Greco-Roman dynasty. After Caesar's assassination, she swiftly allied herself with Mark Antony, another formidable Roman general, bearing him 3 children. These unions were not just about passion. They were about cementing political ties and securing vital military backing to defend Egypt's sovereignty against Octavian, later Emperor Augustus. She was playing a very high-stakes Game of Thrones where her bedroom was a negotiation table. A truly captivating and sometimes exaggerated tidbit about Cleopatra concerns her famed charisma rather than just her physical beauty. Ancient writers describe her captivating voice, her brilliant intellect, and her ability to converse in multiple languages, charming anyone she met. Plutarch, a Greek biographer, noted that her actual beauty, it is said, was not in itself so remarkable that none could be compared with her, or that those who saw her were bound to admire her. But the contact of her presence, if you lived with her, was irresistible. This suggests her allure was less about conventional prettiness and more about a potent combination of wit, intelligence, and strategic charm that enabled her to bend powerful men to her will. She was the ultimate it girl of the ancient world, able to win over anyone with a well-placed word and a strategic smile. The true extent of Cleopatra's sexual agency and how much of her intimate life was genuinely about personal desire versus political necessity continues to be a rich area of scholarly discussion. While she undoubtedly experienced emotions and personal connections, her every action as a monarch was scrutinized and held immense political weight. Some scholars argue that she was a pragmatist, using every tool at her disposal, including her sexuality, to preserve her kingdom's independence. Others emphasize that she was a powerful woman who simply happened to fall in love with powerful men and that their personal affections were genuine. Regardless, Cleopatra's story stands as a testament to a queen who masterfully leveraged her personal relationships to wield unprecedented political power, leaving an indelible mark on both Egyptian and Roman history. From the dramatic political entanglements of Cleopatra's strategic romances, we now lighten the mood considerably, peeking into the more frivolous side of royal existence. Erotic games and royal entertainment. You might assume the pharaohs were always engaged in weighty matters of state and divinity, but even god-kings enjoyed their leisure. And sometimes that leisure involved forms of entertainment and playful activities that subtly or not so subtly touched upon themes of love, desire, and intimacy. Imagine the atmosphere of a royal banquet. Not just solemn affairs, but occasions for music, dance, and revelry. The ancient Egyptians, particularly the elite, appreciated pleasure and beauty. Their leisure time wasn't solely about grand ceremonies. It also involved more relaxed settings where entertainment could take on a more personal and even suggestive tone. These activities offered a contrast to the solemn duties of kingship, allowing for a glimpse into the lighter, more human side of the royal court. It's a foundational historical observation that music and dance were integral parts of ancient Egyptian entertainment, especially at elite gatherings and banquets. Tomb paintings and reliefs frequently depict scenes of musicians playing harps, lutes, and flutes, accompanied by dancers performing graceful or acrobatic movements. While many dances were purely aesthetic, some gestures and costumes could carry suggestive meanings, particularly in a convivial atmosphere. The fluid movements and revealing attire of female dancers, for example, could certainly contribute to a sensual ambiance, part of the overall experience of pleasure for the royal audience. A truly delightful, almost whimsical tidbit involves the discovery of playful artifacts, sometimes described as board games that might have had romantic or even erotic undertones. While the famous game of Senet was more serious, representing a journey through the afterlife, other smaller, less formal games might have been played for amusement, perhaps even involving forfeits or challenges that could become flirtatious. We also find small stylized figurines of dancers or musicians, sometimes depicted in suggestive poses, which might have been used for entertainment or as tokens. Imagine a pharaoh unwinding after a long day of decree-making with a board game that ends in a friendly, flirtatious challenge. It's a very ancient version of Truth or Dare, perhaps with slightly higher stakes if you lost to the king. The specific nature of erotic games within the royal court continues to be a point of careful consideration among scholars. Was it literal explicit play, or was it more about creating a stimulating and pleasurable atmosphere through music, dance, and suggestive imagery? Most interpretations lean towards the latter, emphasizing the enjoyment of beauty, sensuality, and companionship within appropriate social settings rather than outright licentiousness. However, the presence of love poetry and the general appreciation for fertility and pleasure in Egyptian culture certainly suggest that these forms of entertainment were designed to appeal to and perhaps subtly ignite the senses. So, even the pharaoh, with all his divine burdens, understood the importance of a good time, a little music, and perhaps a playful game or two to keep life in the palace well lively. From the light-hearted realm of royal entertainment, you now delve into a more complex and often debated aspect of ancient Egyptian sexuality: homosexuality in ancient Egypt. You might assume a culture so focused on lineage and procreation would have rigidly defined sexual norms. But the evidence, though subtle and open to various interpretations, suggests a more nuanced reality where same-sex relationships may have existed, particularly within elite circles. This isn't about imposing modern labels, but about exploring the hints and whispers left behind in art, texts, and tombs that challenge our preconceived notions of ancient life. Imagine a society where every aspect of existence was geared towards continuity: the endless cycle of the Nile, the rebirth in the afterlife, the unbroken line of pharaohs. In such a context, procreation was paramount. Yet human desire, as always, found its own paths. The lack of explicit condemnation for same-sex acts, unlike in some other ancient cultures, hints at a degree of tolerance, or at least discretion for relationships that didn't directly serve the purpose of generating heirs. The focus was on outward appearance and the fulfillment of societal duties, often leaving private lives less scrutinized, especially for those in powerful positions. One of the most frequently cited pieces of evidence, a compelling historical artifact, is the tomb of Nyankhnum and Khnumhotep from the 5th dynasty, dating back to around 2400 BCE. These two men served as royal manicurists and overseers of the pharaoh's barbers. Their tomb depicts them in an intimate embrace, nose to nose, a pose typically reserved for married couples in ancient Egyptian art. They are even shown holding hands, and their names are frequently inscribed together, often with titles implying a shared life or destiny. While some scholars interpret this as merely a strong fraternal or professional bond, many others consider it the clearest archaeological indication of a romantic or sexual relationship between two men in ancient Egypt. It's like finding the ancient equivalent of a couple's portrait, but one that's been subtly hinting at a deeper connection for thousands of years. Imagine the surprise of the excavators. This particular case sparks a lively academic debate. Was this a portrayal of homosexuality as we understand it today, or simply an exceptionally close platonic bond between two individuals who chose to be buried together? The absence of explicit terminology for homosexuality in ancient Egyptian texts makes definitive conclusions challenging. However, the unique visual representation in their tomb stands out against countless other tomb reliefs, suggesting something extraordinary and deeply personal. It highlights that while the primary societal goal was always procreation, there was likely room for diverse forms of love and companionship, especially among those of higher status who might have been less constrained by conventional expectations. You don't often see such intimate depictions of male friends even in many modern cultures. Another more subtle indication comes from ancient Egyptian literature. Some interpretations of love poetry, particularly those discussing desires and affections without explicit gender markers, have led certain researchers to suggest they could potentially encompass same-sex attraction. For instance, some poems describe the beauty of the beloved in ways that transcend gender-specific traits, allowing for broader interpretations of attraction. While not conclusive proof, these literary ambiguities hint at a world where emotions might have transcended strict societal norms in private expression. We also need to consider the unique status of a pharaoh. As a divine being, he might have been perceived as being above certain societal conventions, potentially allowing for more personal freedom in his intimate relationships. How intriguing to imagine a god-king whose personal life might have quietly defied expectations. Ultimately, the consensus among many Egyptologists is that while same-sex relations were likely present, they were perhaps not openly celebrated due to the overwhelming emphasis on procreation for family and the afterlife. The evidence, though sparse, does suggest that such relationships were not necessarily condemned with the same fervor as in some later cultures. It wasn't about public morality plays. It was about ensuring the continuity of the royal line and the stability of Egypt. So while you won't find parades or explicit treatises on the matter, the subtle hints in their art and the very specific depictions like that of Nyankhnum and Khnumhotep continue to invite us to consider a more complex and inclusive view of love and desire in the land of the pharaohs. The ancient Egyptians, it seems, always had a knack for keeping us guessing, even in their most personal moments. From the intricate social dynamics of same-sex relationships, your journey now flows seamlessly into the very heart and lifeblood of ancient Egyptian civilization. The Nile's symbolism, lifeblood, and lust. You see, for the ancient Egyptians, the Nile River wasn't merely a geographical feature. It was a living deity, the primordial source of their existence, and its annual miraculous flood was the very pulse that sustained their civilization. This profound connection meant that the river's fertile power became inextricably linked with their understanding of human sexuality and procreation, especially concerning the pharaoh. Imagine living in a land where your entire survival year after year hinged on the predictable rhythmic swelling of a single river. The annual inundation depositing rich black silt across the arid land was quite literally the difference between abundant life and devastating famine. This cyclical renewal of the earth, its miraculous revitalization, became a powerful metaphor for regeneration and fertility in human life. The Egyptians observed the natural world with unparalleled keenness, understanding that the bounty of the earth directly mirrored the fruitfulness of human unions. The overflowing Nile spilling forth its life-giving essence was intuitively seen as the earth's grand act of creation. And this powerful imagery undoubtedly permeated their deepest understanding of human intimacy and procreation. It is a widely recognized historical truth that the Nile was personified as the god Hapi, typically depicted as a robust blue-skinned figure, often with pendulous breasts, symbolizing the nourishing and abundant power of the river's annual flood. Hapi wasn't a god of sexual fertility in the typical sense, but rather of the fertile inundation itself. However, the concept of life-giving fertility he embodied was directly correlated with human reproductive capacity. Pharaohs were frequently depicted making offerings to Hapi, not just to ensure a successful harvest, but also to secure their own virility and the unbroken continuation of their divine lineage. There's a palpable visual parallel if you consider it. The river swelling and spilling its contents much like the human body in acts of creation. It truly brings home just how profoundly integrated their spiritual beliefs, agricultural practices, and personal lives were. A particularly evocative, almost mystical tidbit connecting the Nile to royal sexuality appears in certain ritual practices. Some ancient texts hint at ceremonies where the pharaoh himself would symbolically interact with the Nile, perhaps by casting precious offerings or even symbolically casting his own generative fluid into its waters. This was understood as a direct ritualistic act to ensure the river's fertility and, by extension, the land's prosperity. While the literalness of such acts remains a fascinating point of academic discussion, the symbolic intent is crystal clear. The pharaoh, as the living Horus, served as the ultimate conduit between the divine fertility of the cosmos and the earthly fertility of Egypt. His sexual potency was not just a personal matter. It was a concern of national well-being, a direct pulsing mirror of the river's life-giving current. It's like the ultimate, if I perform, the crops grow incentive plan for a ruler. Talk about pressure on the royal performance reviews. The exact extent to which such symbolic acts were literally performed, or if they primarily functioned as metaphorical expressions of the pharaoh's role as chief priest and guarantor of fertility, continues to be explored by contemporary researchers. However, the pervasive imagery of the pharaoh as the bull of his mother, a powerful virile creature symbolizing strength and procreative ability, further solidifies this profound connection. This ancient title didn't just refer to his physical prowess. It encapsulated his essential role in invigorating the land and ensuring its abundance. You can almost feel the humid air, hear the gentle lapping of the water, and vividly imagine the pharaoh surrounded by priests performing ancient rites that he truly believed would make the earth bloom. The Nile wasn't just a river. It was the ultimate enduring muse for fertility, inspiring not just life, but perhaps a certain kind of primal desire for its endless bounty throughout the land. From the life-giving waters of the Nile, we now transition to a more practical, albeit often equally strange, aspect of royal life: magic and curses against impotence. Even for god kings, the challenges of ensuring potency and fertility were very real. The ancient Egyptians, with their surprisingly advanced medical knowledge, didn't rely solely on magic. They also developed a range of physical remedies, some quite sensible, others less so, to maintain the pharaoh's vital role in procreation. Imagine the immense pressure on the pharaoh to produce healthy heirs. It wasn't just about fathering children. It was about demonstrating his divine vitality and ensuring the stability of the entire kingdom. When issues of sexual performance or fertility arose, the royal physicians, highly skilled and respected figures, would be called upon. Their methods were a fascinating blend of empirical observation, herbal lore, and sometimes a touch of what we might call folk medicine. It's a well-established historical reality that ancient Egypt possessed a remarkably sophisticated understanding of medicine as evidenced by numerous medical papyri like the Ebers Papyrus and the Kahun Papyrus. These texts detailed diagnosis, prognosis, and treatments for a wide array of ailments, including those related to the reproductive system. For example, some sections provide remedies for male impotence, often involving mixtures of honey, various plants, and even animal parts. One documented prescription for improving male potency involved consuming specific types of bread mixed with herbs. While we might question the ingredients today, the intent was clearly to address physiological concerns through what they considered scientific means. A particularly quirky tidbit found in these ancient texts includes prescriptions for increasing a woman's fertility that involved rather unappealing concoctions. One such remedy suggested a paste made from dates, beer, and, believe it or not, goose fat to be inserted vaginally. The idea was likely to create a more hospitable environment for conception, though the comfort level of the royal consort during such treatments is left to your imagination. Another example involves fumigating a woman with incense and specific herbs to stimulate fertility. It certainly sounds like a unique spa day, doesn't it? Perhaps not the relaxing kind. The effectiveness of these ancient remedies, much like the magical charms, is something that continues to be a subject of academic inquiry. Were these treatments genuinely effective? Perhaps due to undiscovered pharmacological properties of the herbs? Or did they primarily offer psychological reassurance? Many scholars believe it was a combination of both. The physicians were keen observers and experimenters, but their understanding of biology was intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. They likely approached sexual health with the same holistic view they applied to other illnesses, considering both the body and the unseen forces that could affect it. So, while you might not rush to try a goose fat fertility paste, it reminds us of the desperate and creative measures taken to ensure the pharaoh,